Butte-Silver Bow Council of Commissioners, Committee of the Whole meeting, December 23rd, 2015.
I'll bring the Butte-Silver Bow Council of Commissioners, Committee of the Whole meeting on December 23rd to order. May I have, or please have a roll call.
10 present, 1 presiding, 1 absent.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Shaw is absent tonight. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the report of the chair, I will skip through that for tonight. I would go on to section 1, which is a presentation, communication number 15-537. Karen Burns, Director, Butte-Silver Bow Community Development Department, requesting Council's authorization for a presentation on December 2nd, 2015 regarding the Butte Economic Gardening Project. I was in contact with Ms. Burns tonight, and we are postponing this presentation until the meeting on January 27th. So we'll hold that one in abeyance. Section 2, presentation communication number 15-555. J.P. Gallagher, Director of Butte-Silver Bow Parks and Recreation Department, requesting Council's authorization to give a presentation on December 23rd, 2015 regarding the festival and fair cost breakdown.
Chairperson Morgan, Commissioners, we're going to do our presentation. I have some handouts that I'll give to each one of the commissioners, and then Bob Lazary, who is our Special Events Coordinator, Recreation Coordinator, he'll start off with the presentation, and then after that we'll entertain any questions.
Sounds good.
Chairman Morgan, thank you. Council members, thank you. My name is Bob Lazary. I am the Recreation and Special Event Coordinator for Parks and Recreation, 126 West Granite. J.P. Gallagher, the Parks and Rec Director, and I are going to report on the festival costs that help support the festivals from the past summer of 2015. We gathered this information from each department in order to show their contributions to the festivals. We have also included the funding that each festival has received and the total budget that each festival reported for 2015. That budget total may not include in-kind services from private parties. We also provided a copy of the operating agreement between Butte-Silver Bow and each festival and a task list for Evel Knievel days. So JP handed everybody a copy. We'll be glad to answer any questions if we can.
Do any of...
Oh, hold on for 1 sec. I got
Just
some.
give us the first one and pass them down.
Quick.
JP, do you have anything to add, or are you looking for questions?
Essentially, we're just here to field any questions that you had. As Bob alluded to, as we put this together, we asked all the department heads to send us the accurate numbers that they had that reflected the work that Butte-Silver Bow helped in kind with these festivals. And part of what we want to, this is what we do with festivals. This is what we do for our different events that happen throughout the year. This isn't just specific just to the festivals, and we don't put dollar amounts really to those different things as well. But this is what we do. And one of the things that we didn't put in there this time is the salaries of Bob and myself on there, because that's what we're hired to do here in Butte-Silver Bow. And also, we couldn't account for what Jay and Kelly, their hours that they put into it. But that was part of what was in those numbers before. And we don't think that's a fair evaluation of what actually is done. And we look at it as this is our job. That, you know, to say the hours we put into this, we put hours into recreational things all the time. And, you know, we don't put a bill out on those.
Do any of the commissioners have a question? Commissioner Henderson?
Mr. Chairman, I think this is great to put this out for us, JP and Bob, but it's kind of like to ask questions. I mean, kind of got to study it a little bit. I mean, it's I was wondering if we couldn't kind of come back with these guys, and if we had some questions, because I mean, we got five different packets here, and it came tonight. So I mean, I'm not saying we would have questions. I'm just thinking that it would be kind of hard. I know you're waiting there for some questions, but it's going to take a little bit to read all this stuff and study it.
Yeah, most of what we have there, you know, the one page is the one that has the festival costs. That's the one that really reflects in any of the things that you would like to see on here. The other pieces that we gave to you, the operating agreements, those were passed April of last year that were put into effect there. They've been, you know, I think the commissioners have seen these in the past, so it's not new, but it just was for reference for that, to just so we could kind of talk about things and how some costs were incurred and stuff. So we want to make sure that you had that information in front of you in case any of those questions came forward.
I guess I would just go through and mention that this is a presentation, so we're not asked to take any action tonight. So if any of the commissioners have any questions regarding the information that was passed out tonight, they could always touch base with Mr. Gallagher, or they could submit their own communication and have them come back to this body. So there are options out there if you do have questions as a follow-up. So anybody else have any questions? Commissioner Perdue-Dolan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. JP, thank you for all of this information. I have a question with regard to the $70,000 under Evel Knievel Days under Public Works and Road. It says services, supplies, barricades, hauling, miscellaneous. So that number does not, and I think you alluded to it at the beginning, it does not include the employees and their salaries. That would be a different number, and we'd have to get that and cull that from Public Works. Is that correct?
Commissioner Perdue-Dolan, that is incorrect.
Okay.
That reflects all of the salaries, the equipment, everything is included in that.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. Thank you, JP. Thanks, Bob. What do you attribute? That's the only number on that page that sticks out so far above the rest. The next highest one is like $8,000 to $70,000 for Evel Knievel Days. That's just something that sticks out, and I just kind of wondering why.
JP?
Commissioner Fisher, that is a large number, and that's attributed to the hauling and bringing in of dirt and then the removal of the dirt. That is what caused the largest portion of that. And the rationale and why that happened, and I wasn't part of those conversations before, but that's kind of where I alluded to. If you look at the festival and events coordination, that was the communication on the agenda that actually kind of outlined things that Butte-Silver Bow was going to be responsible for, that was communicated to Evel Knievel Days of these things. The problem that happened with that is the department heads and people that were part of this didn't receive this communication. And so if you look through it, there's a lot of things in here that would lead any of these festivals to believe that Butte-Silver Bow is going to be responsible for a lot. But now once we got to the dirt, more so what happened with that is Evel Knievel Days has communicated with us that their contracts fell through under that situation right kind of at the 11th hour prior to having that event go. And under the MOU, if you look, we have a rider in there that says, and I think this is where Butte-Silver Bow really stepped up and said, all right, we endorse these, we signed off on MOUs, but on the rider, if you look where it says on rider A, it outlines on A of Section 2, Butte-Silver Bow City responsibilities, that we would provide these services. And if you look through that, it's pretty extensive of all the services that we could provide. But the number that, if you look at C, that one really kind of outlines that obtain site access and provide any necessary site improvements. That's under Butte-Silver Bows. So with the things that happened and not having, a backup plan, Butte-Silver Bow kind of incurred those costs. But those are things that we're working with Evel Knievel Days and we're working with the other festivals to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We can outline some things in here because if you look at what rider would be for, in this example, Evel Knievel Days, it says that on item 1 and then item G on there where it says negotiate, prepare, and execute contracts with performers for the festival. We can make sure that those contracts are in place, that we're communicating with those contractors and making sure that they're in line when we're having these festivals ahead of time. And so that'll be our job over the next year. And if any of that falls through, we have the right to say no at that point. That's kind of how we're looking at that as we go forward.
Follow-up, Commissioner Fisher, no? Commissioner Purdue-Dolan and Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. JP, I understand that we have an operating agreement and we have an MOU that Butte-Silver Bow supports all of these festivals, and we certainly support the festivals in order to bring tourists to Butte-Silver Bow, to get our name out in the state and across the country, and it brings people to our city and it promotes Butte-Silver Bow. But I don't see anywhere where the taxpayers of Butte-Silver Bow have to incur $70,000 above and beyond what we pay in the Economic Development Mill Fund, Mill Levy General Fund, where we give in a grant form, $8,000 and sponsorships and other funds to support these festivals, not to mention the in-kind services like Sheriff's Department and trash and other things that we do to not only support in what we say, but in what we do with our wonderful employees. So to go in and try and say with these certain numbers and A's and B's and these certain legalese is wonderful, but I just want to make that comment to as far as the constituents that I represent. I don't want this, and I think you have said that in the future, to make this a precedent. These numbers with the other festivals maybe are more in line with what we should do in the future. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. Thanks for the presentation. I think it would be helpful if we have a list of what the run-up lists for the other festivals were. We have the sheet for Knievel Days, what the tasks were for the meeting that you held, but any communication from the other festivals, the fair, the Irish Festival, the Folk Festival, I think it is a more accurate reflection of your job and what you do for the summer and the events if we include all of the task for all of the festivals instead of just the one sheet. So a suggestion, I think it would be helpful if you could provide notes and talking points about what it takes to put on each festival as just opposed to the one sheet for Knievel Days. So follow-up information after would be great.
McDonough, yeah, and I would agree with that. The reason we provided that today was not so much to pinpoint Evil Knievel Days. It was more to show that there was communication that was shared with this festival that was never shared with the department heads on that. And that was, so there's things within that communication that went to Evil Knievel Days that a lot of the responsibilities in there, Butte-Silver Bowl probably wouldn't normally take on those things because there's even equipment and it's saying on part of that, nobody knows what it, make needed safety and health repairs. And this is listed on every single, and no department head understood what that meant. So this was a list that Kelly had provided, and it was just more of reference saying there's tasks in here that I could see where a festival may think that Butte-Silver Bowl could do more things than possibly that we could do. And that's going to be our job going forward with this, to make sure that everything's in line and that all the festivals understand what Butte-Silver Bowl can do. Because the benefit is there. The benefit is, we see it, we understand it, and we're working to make this better. But in response to kind of Commissioner Perdue-Dolan, when we were talking about that cost seems a lot, but there's also events that go on in Butte that we're not even referencing here. About every 6 years, we put on a baseball or a softball tournament that'll bring in a lot of different teams in here, and it takes the Parks and Rec a lot of man hours to take out every mound in the Little League fields, all the dirt work, all the different things, and those costs are never passed on to anybody else. But that's what we do. That's what we do with our festivals. That's what we do with our events. That's our job for a lot of those things. Now, this last year in that one line item, it's high, and that's what our job is going to be, is to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Okay, follow-up, Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. I would request that we would have an inventory, though, of all of the stuff that we have purchased over the years with the Butte Events team. I would appreciate if we could inventory the equipment and just report back with what we still have and where it's located at.
Commissioner McDonough, we have already started doing that, and one of the things that we are going to do in the future is we're not allowing even the festival people to just have total access to these. We'll have a Parks and Rec staff member there that will be checking it out and then making sure that it's checked back in. And we're working with the Civic Center at this current time to make sure that we're inventorying all of the equipment that we do have. And there's talk of possibly making sure we put everything down in a central location so that as stuff is pulled out of there and put back in, that we do have an inventory of it. So that is something we are doing currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sorich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is off base just a little bit, but, with the removal of parrot tailings, that's going to probably change the Civic Center parking lot. Has there been any discussions how this is going to potentially affect the festivals? Or JP talking about it at all?
Commissioner Sorich, that's a topic that we really haven't explored, and it's something I think that we do need to. So thank you for bringing that to our thoughts, and we can talk about that going forward. But that's something we haven't talked about yet.
Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I appreciate it. I did have one question. It kind of goes back to the Butte Events team, and I know that a majority of that money was spent on tables, chairs, and miscellaneous things that is stored at the Civic Center, and I see a cost here of the department of the Civic Center for $8,400, $3,500, $1,500, and $9,700 for the different festivals. I thought all of that stuff was purchased, so how come it's being added to these again? Is it something separate, or is it?
Commissioner Anderson, I can't answer that totally for you because I don't know if they're charging. I don't think that's a charge of using the equipment. I think it's more of setup and use of Civic Center staff.
Okay.
Those are hours that, because we do put up staging. They bring those materials from the Civic Center up. I think that's reflective of those costs.
The cost of the setup.
That's cost of the setup. I think those are reflective of the cost of the setups more than it is any of the cost of actually using the equipment.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. JP, Bob, I'd just like to say, I know you got put in the middle of these festivals, and I commend you for the work you're doing, and I look forward to your work in the future, because I think it's going to be a great asset to these festivals and the community. But in that regard, when I look at the Evil Knievel days at 129,000 plus, what do you suppose the Evil Knievel committee had in this? Do you suppose that 129 was 30% of the investment, or 50%? Or do you think they had a larger input? I mean, do you have any idea? Maybe this is a question you can't answer, but.
I think we can answer that question. If you look at the bottom line of this festival total budget, that was what I'm sorry, Commissioner Fisher, that is their cash expense at the bottom of that. That's the money that was raised and what they paid out for theirs. That also does not include their in-kind, that they have people that work there. And talking to Jen Prigge, she stated that was probably $200,000 to $300,000 more in kind that was added to it. So when we look at that $129,000 that was spent this year, which is higher than it has ever been in any of the festivals when we look back, it's about a quarter of what they spend.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any questions? JP, Laz, thank you for the report, and I look forward to working with you next year. Commissioner Anderson, follow up?
Thank you very much, Sir Chairman. One quick follow-up. I saw this SARTA, S-A-R-T-A, and sponsorship and other funding for all the festivals, and no idea what it is for the life of me. I was trying to figure it out.
Redevelopment Trust.
We can, Commissioner Anderson, we can kind of bring light and clarification to that. All of that is the SARTA funding, except for $5,000 that was provided by the chief executive to the fair for $5,000 to allow the fair to be a free event this year. They looked back at what the cost was, and to make that fair a free event this year, there was a $5,000 donation from the chief executive's office to promote that to be a free event like all of our other festivals are.
Okay.
Mr. Moore, Chairman.
The SARTA money, I was just trying to figure out what that acronym stood for.
Well, it's the ARCO redistribution.
The ARCO redistribution.
Yeah, that's
funds.
ARCO,
Okay.
yes.
Chief Executive Vincent?
It's a redevelopment trust fund.
Yeah, it stands for Superfund Advisory Redevelopment Trust Authority.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Henderson, did you have any?
No, I just was adding a
Okay.
chief executive.
All right. Is there any other questions? Commissioner Purdue-Dolan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one more. JP, do you know how many folks attended Evil Knievel Days, so we can kind of put a number with the 129,000 to put a number to how many folks attended? Thank you.
JP.
Commissioner Purdue-Dolan, as we looked at these, we did not look to put the numbers to this because both Evil Knievel Days and Folk Festival had the University of Montana do surveys out there. I don't know if that data has been made available for those two festivals, and I want to make sure that any data that we give you is accurate. And so I know last year as EJ did his presentation, he put those numbers in with this. I didn't feel comfortable doing that without having real solid proof of putting those statistics in there. So we didn't add that in there because I didn't have a solid basis to add that to this.
All right. Well, thank you for the presentation. Moving on the agenda, is there any public comment on any items that are on the agenda? If there's any public comment on any items that's on the agenda, please come up to a microphone and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Dan O'Neill, 305 West Mercury. I haven't seen a copy of the agenda. Is there one available?
There is one, Mr. O'Neill, at where you come into the door.
I guess simply is the parking garage on here. Has there been any discussion on that?
I don't believe that is on tonight's agenda. But there is a spot after the agenda, Mr.
For public comment?
Yeah,
Okay.
for any
I'll wait
item that's
till
not
then
on
then.
tonight's agenda, so. Is there any other comments on any items that are on tonight's agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to section 3, which is communication number 15-356. Kenneth and Michelle Palmer, 936 Zerelda Street, Butte, Montana, requesting council's authorization to purchase county-owned property under the adjacent landowner policy. We're going to continue to hold this one in abeyance as we are waiting for a survey. Section 4, communication number 15-415, Robert A. Makarowski, Director, Butte-Silver Bow Land Office, requesting council's authorization for the sale of county-owned property under adjacent landowner policy, and for the council to ask the county attorney to prepare the resolution and deed for the transfer of the property. I will ask Commissioner Walker, as we do have a resolution now. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I'd like to make a motion to cross-reference communication number 15-415 with resolution 15-48 and place on file.
Second.
motion made and seconded to cross-reference communication 15-415 with resolution 15-48 and place on file. Is there anything on the question? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Section 5, communication number 15-470. Dave Palmer, Butte-Silver Bow Commissioner, District Number 12, requesting a crosswalk installed on Center Street, speed zone signs to be installed on Center Street, a tree on the corner of Buffalo and Main Streets to be trimmed, and a review of the alarm at the fire station. Commissioner Palmer?
Just like to hold this in abeyance until the Centerville Neighborhood Committee has their meeting again.
Okay. Section 6, communication number 15-490, Karen Burns, Director, Butte-Silver Bow Community Development Department, requesting council's recommendation to approve council communication number 15-460, request from Blaine Brown to purchase city-county property under the adjacent landowner policy. We will continue to hold this one in abeyance as we're still waiting on a survey. Section 7, communication number 15-498, Jeffrey L. Miller, Director, Butte-Silver Bow Fire Services, requesting council's authorization to hold a public hearing on November 18th, 2015 regarding the proposed sole source purchase of 25 self-contained breathing apparatus for the Butte-Silver Bow Fire Department. We'll continue to hold this in abeyance as we're waiting for a draft of the resolution. Section 8, communication number 15-525, Kelly Anderson, Extension Agent, Butte-Silver Bow Extension Office, requesting council's authorization for the Chief Executive to sign an agreement with Montana State University Extension Office. I know there was a request to extend this contract's acceptance date. I would refer to Chief Executive Vincent for an update.
Commissioner Morgan, I did make a request, given the short amount of time between last week's meeting and this week's meeting, to the MSU extension to grant us an extension of the deadline on that contract from December 31st to January 31st. They granted it, which will give us a month to sit down with the parties and reach some resolution. But I would make the point that as we move forward on this, and we thank them for it because it would have been a short turnaround, but these are really two separate issues. The contract, which includes everything that our county extension agent does, versus the resolution, which is just to focus on resolving the communication issues relative to the 4-H portion of that contract. So I just want folks to know when that does come to a vote, we need to keep in mind that this is not just a vote whether we continue our 4-H program or not. It's that we're voting to continue a contract that would allow us to continue our extension agency and our relationship with the MSU extension or not.
Okay. So we'll continue to hold that in abeyance pending a report back. Section 10, Section 9, communication number 15-527, Kevin Kennelly, Town Pump Incorporated, requesting council's concurrence in the donation of the property to Butte-Silver Bow. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion at this time to cross-reference communication number 15-527 with a resolution 15-47 and place on file.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to cross-reference communication 15-527 with resolution 15-47 and place this communication on file. Is there anything on the question? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Section 10, communication number 15-537. Karen Burns, Director, Butte-Silver Bow Community Development Department, requesting council's authorization for a presentation on December 23rd, 2015 regarding the Butte Economic Gardening Project. As you heard me earlier, we are holding this one in abeyance until January the 27th. Section 11, communication number 15-550. Edward Pape of Mr. Ed Saloon, requesting council incorporate a means for the chief executive and Butte-Silver Bow Council of Commissioners to answer questions presented by the public. I do not see Mr. Pape out there. Is there any update from either Commissioner McDonough or anybody? Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I haven't heard from Mr. Pape. I think it'd be best to hold it in abeyance, I guess, until he has a chance to speak his mind. However, his communication in front of us asking for dialect or dialogue between the council and members of the public, I think would violate public agendas and open meeting laws, but I'm not sure that his agenda is, or his letter for his request is clear. So maybe the county attorney would want to weigh in on that part, but 3 parts of the communication deal with 3 different issues, and his summary is that have an open dialogue with council, which I think clearly violates the agenda and public meeting laws. So maybe we'll hold it in abeyance, but I don't think his request is clear unless County Attorney Joyce wants to weigh in.
County Attorney Joyce.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McDonough, does that mean I have a choice? I don't have the communication in front of me, but if his communication just asked for a general dialogue, that probably would violate the open meeting and public participation laws, because you'd have to have a more specific item that he wanted to discuss, so the public would know what whether they wanted to participate in that discussion. If his agenda, our request is more to just ask procedural questions, that's okay for the council to explain to him how to get a matter before the agenda and to discuss a specific item. But I think that would have to be explained to Mr. Pape if he does come to the council, to explain that if he has a particular item he wants to discuss, he would have to submit a specific communication on that item, and that you can't just have a forum back and forth asking questions.
Commissioner McDonough, do you think it'd be okay if you contacted him and let him know when our next committee of the whole meeting is, and give him the opportunity to come before us and tell us his case, and then from there we can make a decision?
Chairman Morgan, I would contact Mr. Pape and explain that to him. I've segregated from the regular meeting in January too. If he shows up on the 7th to discuss the issue, I could segregate it at that point as well.
Okay. Commissioner Fisher, you have a comment?
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. If we recall last week, I believe it was, Mr. Pape came at the start of the meeting when we had a full house of people here, and he came to Chairman Shaw and told her to pull his communication from the agenda. Now, what he meant by that, out of courtesy, Commissioner McDonough held it in abeyance, and I think he also maybe left a note for Mr. McDonough that wasn't a common courtesy as well as common courtesy Mr. McDonough gave him. So at this time, I would make a motion that we note and place on file communication 15-550.
Motion made and seconded to note communication number 15-550 and place this communication on file. Is there anything on the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay. Section 12, communication number 15-555, J.P. Gallagher, Director of Butte-Silver Bow Parks and Recreation Department, requesting council's authorization to give a presentation on December 23rd, 2015 regarding the festival and fair cost breakdown. We held this presentation tonight, so I'd go to Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seeing as how that was held tonight, I would like to make a motion to place communication number 15-555 on file.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to place communication number 15-555 on file. Is there anything on the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Section 13, communication number 15-558, Lori Casey, Assistant Planning Director, Butte-Silver Bow Planning Board, requesting a public hearing on January 13th, 2016 for the preliminary plat of the Copper Fox Estates. We'll continue to hold this in abeyance until January the 13th for the public hearing. At this time on the agenda, I would ask for any public comment on any public matter that's not on tonight's agenda. If you have any comments, please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Neill.
My name's Dan O'Neill. I'll use 305 West Mercury, which is the Business Development Center. And since this is the last, I guess I'll feel a little bit more confident to spend a little time on this issue, or 3 issues. I have 3 printouts here, and there's 12 copies. I'll keep one and then leave it when I'm done speaking. But rather than just leave it for you, I might address some of the issue and practice my public speaking. So I follow the paper, but I'm not really certain where you guys are at with the parking garage. But I wanted to focus a little bit on my experience with low bid and construction management, which I identified on there. And by the way, commissioners, there is a letter, or I don't really know what to call it, transfer of information. And then there's also a Excel spreadsheet, which relates to the business licensing, number 2 that I have. So again, it says here, I'm not really certain with regards to the parking garage, if anything's moving forward, if this topic is current, or if as a resident wrote into the Montana standard that since their charter wasn't followed, if the whole thing's going to have to take a back seat and then come about in a different fashion. But briefly, I want to explain the low bid system from my experience as the best method of a public works project and private project. When all known facts are taken into consideration and there is an accurate plan set from which all contractors get to bid, the low bid system does not work when the project owner, in this case Butte-Silver Bow, allows for change orders to occur. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because change orders have become a popular method in the construction industry to sidestep errors and omissions. You might use the word I don't want to go so far as to say corruption, but it's a loophole. And that's when the architect or engineer that drafted the plan that was let allows for a change to occur. However, the loophole also creates an opportunity for abuse by contractors who can use the change order to exaggerate and inflate an additional cost when the project is in process. Sometimes those change orders are built in, and by built in I mean there's communication between contractors, architects, and engineers that we, the public, may not understand. Well, I have a little bit better insight to it now. So those change orders are built in to allow a winning contractor to generate additional income after the project is awarded, which would require additional work, which was planned, however unspecified, by the architect and or engineer to review and approve changes that are being considered. So as the paper has reported, so far the city is considering a construction manager. If the city is only allowing contractors with experience to bid the public process, then the low bid system is the only method that should be used, because all things considered, a parking garage is a very simple and basic structure, and the current construction methods have been around for more than 40 years. The contractors submitting a bid are very knowledgeable and experienced in their industry, and any questions that may have arisen should be answered before the bid is submitted. And a lot of times those questions, they don't want the questions, they want those to arise after the bid's been let. So allowing the construction manager option, it's what I feel should be discouraged, because experienced contractors can take advantage of that position. It basically gives the contractor an open person checkbook. And with this option, experienced contractors may, one of the following, all of which I've witnessed in my time in the construction industry, purchase excessive materials, some of which go to their storage yards rather than the job site. Another loophole is that contractors may pay retail pricing to the vendors rather than wholesale pricing and submit retail invoices for payment to the project owner. The vendor later returns the materials at retail price, resells them at wholesale price, and the contractor collects the difference, sometimes even split with the salesman. There are also some vendors who provide yearly and bi-yearly tropical vacations to their industry contractors who purchase a specific quantity of a particular item. Might be steel in the case of the parking garage. By doing this, or four-wheelers or snowmobiles, by doing this, it increases the contractor's cost of goods sold and reduces their taxable income. The vendor also reduces their taxable income by chartering an airplane and paying all resort fees, which they can categorize as a travel and lodging expense. Meanwhile, the contractor is still covering all of his costs, and the potential to lose money is virtually not possible. The government agency is none the wiser of what is actually occurring. Finally, with the construction manager option, the construction manager has less of a need to establish a completion date. This affects the labor cost by removing expediency, and there is also a potential by the subcontractors to bill for labor hours that were not performed, or for labor hours at a supervisor rate rather than a technician rate. The construction manager option could be considered when a qualified contractor is interested in managing the project, however may not have the experience with a project of the size and scope, and is willing and able to have direct oversight by a local agency and project owner. The second item is the purchase of a fire tanker and tender, and only because it clearly relates to the same thing as building the parking garage. But rather than go through that item by item, I'll let you guys look through that. One that I want to go to my third subject, because this has aggravated me for a long time. And again, now that I have a little extra time, I might give some personal experience on why. But I did outline some recent issues. But it's regarding business licenses, business registration, and business liability insurance. I seem to be the only person who is concerned if my fellow citizens are licensed and insured. Based on a particular experience I had over this past weekend, I may be the only person who even thinks we should have business licenses or rules to follow. You as the council are probably split as well, considering how many occasions you suspend the rules. You can laugh or not laugh. As I sit here and type this, I wonder, apology, I didn't get to edit this as quick. I wonder if the debate is for enforcement or abandonment of licensing altogether. However, I'm going to briefly share some of the experiences I've had in the past 2 years so you have a reasonable understanding. First of all, I was personally denied a business license in Powell County. The reason given that they gave on paper was because the city council determined there was an adequate number of landscape professionals in Powell County and did not need additional landscapers, so the license was denied. When this happened, I spoke with Commissioner Anderson. I said, what is going on, are we just granting licenses to anybody? Because this is my experience in Powell County. Do you recall this?
I do remember that.
Okay. So I thought this is absolutely, I never thought I'd get denied for a license anywhere. I go to Anaconda, I buy a license. Went to Helena, buy a license. Missoula, buy a license. Butte, get a license. So anyways, so that's just a background piece of information. But to move forward, whether or not, I know Bill's on there, but there's Facebook classifieds where people buy and sell goods and services. So a year and a half ago, I'm not going to name names here, but a Butte High math teacher was advertising online that he installed sprinkler systems, going so far as to name a price in the advertisement, which was $1,500. I asked him if he was licensed, insured, or if he calculated gallons per minute, pressure loss, a lot of other environmental factors that a landscape professional might consider, all of which he didn't answer and basically turned it into the MEA MFT attacking me. So and his daughter leaving comments on my Facebook page and a bunch of other crap. So again, we move on. Then about a month or two ago, there's a posting for firewood online from a person from Powell County who actually listed his location as Powell County, but was originally from Anaconda, selling in the Butte classifieds. So I asked this particular person if he was licensed and insured, and that was basically because he had this rickety old trailer with, wood basically could have fallen out if it hit a little bump, and I've hit a bump on the highway carrying a load, and I know what a little bump will do. And I mean, he went on, and again, you get 3 or 4 other people coming after me, and all I asked was, they prove that he was licensed and insured. And he said, yeah, look it up under his business name. So I looked it up, and it was 2006 was the last time he had a license. So he deleted that particular post. Then, this past weekend, 10/18, there were 3 people that made posts about shoveling snow. I asked each of them, are you licensed and insured? And that simple question turned into a comedy show or a firestorm, because one of the people that I posted or asked the question of happened to be a 13-year-old girl. Now, I was accused of everything from harassment to bullying. and quite frankly, it was a comedy show, but I felt by the end of it that, I put in here, it could have been a coup d'etat, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, organized by the same particular high school math teacher who seemed to be involved, or a bunch of people jumping on the bandwagon of ignorance, or basic political affiliations. I did not count, but I would estimate that over 300 people made derogatory statements or comments to me, 31 people posted negative reviews on my Facebook page, and over 500 comments in total were made on 2 postings. I was placed in a position of defense, which I upheld. The comments are all still online, and you could read and see that I said nothing negative or harassing towards a particular girl. So the reason this is, I came today, I already had wanted to talk about the parking garage. I've been working on that, but this just came to light, is because there's so many people online in Butte that are engaged in what I consider business commerce as a business major who earned a degree in business, through shoveling, mowing, painting, property maintenance, high school fundraisers, 4-H groups, etc., or multi-level marketing commerce such as Avon, Rodenfield, Scentsy Candles, Mary Kay, etc., that I believe, based on our laws, and maybe that's why I'm here, so we can all figure out what the law is and if the license should be required, but that they should have a business license if they're conducting commerce in the city of Butte. The city and the state is the only loser if it turns a blind eye. I must have, like I said, I prepared this pretty quickly. Blind effort makes sure that any individual that has the intent of generating personal income or regular supplemental income has an active business license. I do not consider garage sale or items sold in classified advertisements to be considered regular supplemental income. However, what I think is probably the most revealing about the entire situation is that there was public officials, high school teachers, individuals employed by Butte-Silver, including people working in this building, based on what they're saying on their Facebook page, that made harassing and ignorant comments in an attempt to make me appear as if I was bullying the girl or harassing her. What could have become a teaching example in business principles became an adult sideshow of stupidity and ignorance. In fact, the same math teacher mentioned above came to the girl's defense as if to perpetuate the disregard of local laws and standard business practices of buying a license and insurance. Now, as a side note, there's so many laws that we create, the drinking laws and for these young kids and age of consent. And if these business laws don't have an age on them, maybe we should think about putting an age on them. Because what they were saying is that because she's 13, and again, it was just in general, that she didn't need to have a license. And I look back and I think, geez, I was about 13 when I filed my first tax return at Mark Rule's office. I still have it. I think I was probably a sophomore or junior in high school when I got a business license. So they're saying, well, you don't need one. Well, why do we have any laws then? Supposedly we have a juvenile court. It always amazes me that a 13 or 14 or 16-year-old kid, they get in trouble, and then they decide to get charged in adult court. Well, what the hell do we have a juvenile court for if they're going to adult court for a charge? Why in the hell do we have the laws? So, anyways, the reason I put together this particular, just very briefly, was to get you to think about the cost of following the law. And there's a particular commissioner in here who I used to do business for one year, and a high school friend of mine ended up doing work for that particular commissioner the year later, and I would put money on it that high school friend of mine has never had a business license in the 15 years that he's mowed lawns. He's probably never bought insurance. Neither is his dad, who works for the city. So anyways, you go through this and you look at this. Let's just say, all facts considered, you got a small business person, whether shoveling snow, painting houses, mowing a lawn, whatever else, selling Scentsy candles. And straight across, they all make $50,000 in a year. And you get the person A, who's following the laws, doing everything, comes out, you can see the chart, pays his taxes, and what does he have left? You go through person B, C, D, F, and you can plug in or out any of the factors. So it's just something to get your, put your minds on. And I don't know how to make it an agenda item, but to finish what I was going here, it's with all the financial investment and time spent arguing over local business development and which agencies are responsible for the development, BLDC, Chamber of Commerce. I do not see much effort by any government agent, I've never seen anyone online, business development official, or commissioner to reach out to these people. More effort and encouragement is needed at the very beginning of a business rather than 5 to 10 years of struggling. An effort should be made at the beginning to encourage them to become law-abiding, tax-paying citizens who might go on to be successful entrepreneurs and launch a business with a regional or national headquarters based in Butte, Montana, USA. And that's all I have for you today.
Okay. Is there any other public comments on any items that are not on tonight's agenda? All right. Seeing nobody else, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Motion made to adjourn and seconded. Anything on the question? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Have a good night and happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.